This is the Sony Xperia stream with the model number XQZ-GG01. So I'm gonna unbox it quickly. And this device was initially created for the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV, so that would make it easier for people to use it for gaming. So here you have some leaflets that come with it. So there's nothing on the top. On the back you have the fan, so this fan will blow air onto the phone and cool it down. So both the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV and the Sony Xperia 1 Mark V smartphones overheat. It's worse on the Mark IV and slightly better on the Mark V, but both of them overheat nevertheless. So this fan helps with that. And on the bottom of this device, you have a HDMI port, an Ethernet port, a USB-C port, and a microphone and headphone port. And there's a button here, and then here you have a USB-C port. So this is a male USB-C, so it plugs into the phone. So you extend it, and then you put the phone in, and then you press it back in, and this will be the case for the phone, and it will cool it down and also give you Ethernet access and HDMI output and USB-C for powering it, as well as a headphone port. So let me just see if there's anything in these leaflets that's useful. Okay, nothing in English here. So, okay, here's the instruction set. So it's just about tells you how to use it. Put the phone in, turn it on, connect USB power, turn on the smartphone, and gives you a list of the different components. And number 5 is the emergency stop button. So the fan stops when pressed, it restarts when long pressed. So that's the button here. So that's to stop the fan. And you restart it when you long press it. And there's also an LED here, and that LED, according to the manual, will have the colors green, red and orange, depending on if the fan is rotating or flashes red during an emergency stop or abnormal stop. So I think that refers to the fan. And then when it's orange, it turns off after being lit for 1 second when the charger is connected. So this device should let you use the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV and Mark V for gaming and keep it cool with the fan, and also have better internet connection with the Ethernet port. And I think the HDMI is only HDMI out, so you cannot use the HDMI as a HDMI in port to, for example, do screen recording or recording whatever comes out through another device's HDMI port. But I will test it nevertheless, because this will be interesting in terms of taking a camera's output into this device and then live streaming with the phone or recording with the phone. But I don't think that's possible with this device. So this is just to output it to a larger screen. So to my knowledge, this device is only compatible with the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV and Mark V. So I'm going to try it with the Mark V. So you still have access to the buttons on the side of the phone, but it does block out the cameras on the back. So if it didn't block out the cameras on the back, you could use this for live streaming with the phone, and the fan would help to keep the phone cool. Whereas right now, when you do live stream with this phone, the phone will typically overheat, and in order to avoid overheating of the phone when you're live streaming and recording video with the camera, you have to switch to low resolution, switch off electronic stabilization, and use lower bit rates, and pretty much switch off a lot of the features that you would otherwise want to have when recording video. Anyway, I won't go into the details of how you can keep the phone cool without this case, but let's see if I can turn the fan on. So this is the screen that appears when you insert it for the first time and start using it. So there seems to be an activation process that you have to complete. So it says use fan. So it tells you to put the phone with the screen down if you want to put it on a table so that it doesn't obstruct the air inlet on the fan. So this is telling you whether you want to have the fan always on or only have it on when you use certain apps. So there's a app on the Sony Xperia phones which is called Game Enhancer, and you can use a lot of the settings in that to control these things. So let me just turn this on for the time being. Actually, I will leave it off for the time, and I will change this later through Game Enhancer depending on how that works. So this option allows you to continue cooling the phone even when the phone is in sleep mode. So I'm going to switch this on. If the phone is hot, then I would want it to cool down in case I want to start using it again. So you can assign the fan on-off button to the shutter button of the camera on the phone. I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to use the button in that way. If I need to turn the fan on or off, I'll just use the button on the Xperia stream instead. So I'm just going to press next. So there's a few interesting things that it says here. One of them is that the USB-C port cannot be used for data. So you wouldn't be able to use this device as a streaming device if you wanted to connect the UVC camera output to it. So I'm going to go through the setup of Game Enhancer and then start using it. And another thing I wanted to mention is that it's charging the device, and I didn't realize that the Sony Xperia Stream actually has a battery in it because it just looked like a cover as opposed to having a battery. So I will look at that again to see where the battery is, because I didn't actually see any battery anywhere. And here you can see that it says charging connected device via USB. So that's referring to the Xperia Stream. So one of the features of the Game Enhancer is that you can bypass charging the battery. So when you plug in a USB-C, instead of charging the battery, it will just run the device from the USB-C port. And then there are some other settings as well, such as blocking the notifications if you're playing video games, and also you can screenshot and record the screen. And this is an option on how you want the Game Enhancer menu to appear. So I'm just going to leave it as the floating icon, which is the default, but you can have it as a pull down menu as well. And you can also hide call notifications, and it tells you how to set the permission policy if you want to do screen recording to make sure that it gives enough access to it. And it also gives you an option to set the thermal limit for the device, so your device doesn't go above that temperature. And some more options for taking screenshots. And it seems to have a lot of features for streaming your gameplay. So you can have screens if you're away from the gameplay, and also have the comments show up on your stream. So that's quite nice. I don't do gameplay, but that would be a nice feature to have. And you can also adjust the different settings for the fan rotation, whether you want to have it as auto or manual, and you can do that for individual games as opposed to one generic setting for everything. And it just gives you some more organization options in terms of organizing all the icons for the different games in one place. So I haven't selected that, but all the settings can be changed afterwards as well. So I'm just going to press got it, and here you see the permissions. So I'm just going to grant all the permissions. So I wanted to test whether I can use the Xperia Stream to actually stream video from a camera. So I have a camera here and I've connected the HDMI into this, but essentially it doesn't recognize an input to it. So inputting through the HDMI doesn't work. So next I will try a capture card and connect it to the USB-C to see if that works. Okay, so I've connected a capture card. This is the capture card. And I want to see whether it will be able to recognize the input from that. Okay, so you can see it gives a message to say that it doesn't recognize anything, which is in line with what the manual said for this device. You cannot transfer data from the USB-C port. It's only for powering it. And the HDMI is only for output, so you cannot input to it. So the only real advantage of this device is to use the Ethernet port. So in theory, I could be using this device to film and stream with it, but it actually blocks the camera, so that's not really an option. And it doesn't have any nice 1/4" 20 threads on it, or anything that you can use it to mount it on top of a camera or a tripod or anything. So I think this device is good for playing video games and keeping the device cool, but aside from that, it has a few problems. One is that the cameras cannot be seen, so you cannot use the camera on live stream. Otherwise it would be really good since it has an Ethernet port. The other problem with it is that the HDMI cannot be used as a capture card, so you don't have HDMI in option with this. And the third problem is that the USB-C is not usable for data transfer, so you cannot even connect the capture card to it, so it's only for powering the device. And the fourth problem is that you don't actually have any nice mounting options here. So you know how I said that it blocks the camera? So in theory you should be able to use the camera on the front, so it will be lower quality, but maybe if you're streaming that doesn't really matter because the quality of the stream is more likely to be affected by the bandwidth of your internet, so the bitrate that you encode in and how much you can actually send or upload to the live streaming server. So in theory you should be able to live stream in this orientation without actually looking, but there's no real nice option to mount this device anywhere. So if you're holding it in the hand, yes, that's fine, but you cannot see what you'd be filming, and you cannot mount it anywhere neither where it would give you the option to actually connect a different monitor to it. So Sony does have a monitor for both their cameras as well as their smartphones, but since the USB-C on this device doesn't support data transfer, you won't be able to use that monitor with it. Otherwise you could stream in this direction and have a monitor facing you, but the lack of mounting options also would restrict that option. So aside from playing video games, I think this device is not actually that useful. And even the newer versions of the Sony Xperia phone, so the Sony Xperia Mark 6, has different dimensions, so this device won't work with the newer phones anyway, so it only works with the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 4 and Mark 5. Now Sony has created a separate device which is called the data transmitter. I don't remember the exact model number for it, but that device actually does take HDMI in, and it has 2 USB-C ports, so you can charge it with one USB-C port and also have it for data transfer for the other USB-C port. And the internal specification of that device is identical to the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 5, apart from the cameras which it is missing. So it does have one camera, but I think that one camera is lower quality than all the other cameras, and it doesn't have the additional cameras which the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 5 has. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions about this device or if you want me to test anything with it.